All right, we're now recording our 3/23/2021 session starting at 10:30 because we're having technical problems this morning for some reason. But those of you who are watching this recorded, it will not affect you. All right, I hope everybody had a great time off. We have good news. I think I may have mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. I track all these, I shouldn't say all, I track a lot of really good sites talking about COVID. And the ones that I trust, the ones that are medically, scientifically supported, are basically saying, for instance, people that of my age, because we've been having access to the COVID shots, the vaccinations, my age group and above are already have accomplished herd immunity. And herd immunity basically means within our group, we're not going to get COVID from anybody that's in our group or older. So obviously that's the goal for all ages, but the way with the rationing of the COVID vaccine, we started with the most vulnerable, the ones that the COVID could kill, and then we're moving our way down. So as of today, the latest statistic is like 75% of people over 60 are been vaccinated. So we are essentially at herd immunity. And the rest of you youngsters will be getting there probably within the month. So by the end of April, for all intents and purposes, this COVID-19 has been broken. So there are some people that will still get it, but it's not going to be a growing issue. And if you look at the statistics still show that people are getting sick from it, but the hospitalizations, of course, and the deaths are going way down. So it might be true. We had spring break in Florida and all these crazy people running around. None of them have masks on. So maybe because of that, a bunch of kids are going to get COVID. And this may sound cruel, but that's fine because they're not going to go to the hospital. They're not going to need hospitalization, and they're not certainly going to die from it. So when you get either people who have had it and now they have antibodies, they can't get it and they can't spread it again. Then you have people like me who have the vaccine. So now I can't get it and I can't spread it. And then when you have your group, younger group, getting infected, but obviously not being hospitalized and obviously not dying, then we've kicked the disease. So I can tell you, I just heard from the administration yesterday. Well, I didn't personally hear, but a friend of mine who keeps track of all this crap. The word at the college is we don't know what we're going to do in fall. My prediction is we're going back to face-to-face. And if people are not comfortable with that, then online is always available. But if you are like most of my students and me, we don't like learning online. It's not anywhere near what we're accustomed to in face-to-face. Now, I don't mind teaching online because if I didn't have this ability to to have, in essence, face-to-face communication with you, then this would be really boring. So I always thank those students who show up, because I know that they're at least listening, and if they have a question, then they can ask it, and they're getting the full benefit of a live class. And the rest of you are you know, moving your schedule around and watching this taped video at some other time. So anyway, welcome back. Like I said, I hope you had a relaxing time. Fortunately for me, I teach at a couple places, but I got a new class the week before last. So my semester break, spring break, Easter break, was spent really drilling down in that class and making sure they're all good to go, because it's a 5-week class. It's college class, of course. It's an undergraduate class, and it's all online, and it's 5 weeks long. So what they do is pretty intense, because they only have 5 weeks to do it. I mean, come on, that's 1/3 of the time that you guys have. So it's fairly intense. So it was good for me, because I had lots of time. It kept me busy, kept me from drinking wine and falling down drunk in the street or something. I wouldn't do that. I might drink some wine, but I'm not going to be falling down drunk. Anyway, so welcome back. Here we are, chapter 9, if my feeble memory works. And this is on adolescent development. We just went over kind of the puberty years, and we ended up talking a little bit about formal operations and the fact, according to Piaget, and remember, formal operations is the mind's ability, because of development, to be able to think abstractly. Like, what do you think herd immunity in April, how do you think that's going to affect classes in fall? Well, you can sit back and say, well, if nobody's getting sick, or very few people getting sick, and absolutely nobody's dying, then we should be able to go back full steam, face to face, and we don't have to worry about this BS. You know, listen to this. This is why you guys should think about critical thinking anytime I or anybody else who's behind the microphone or in front of you in class says anything. Your critical thinking skills should say, what? Okay, grab this one out of the air. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, the government agency that's supposed to be informing us, and I've already criticized them many, many times in this class, and I will be doing it today again. They have now decided that it is safe for students in classrooms to be 3 feet apart and not 6 feet apart. And you might say, well, that's a great thing. Well, the point is, what great scientific discovery led them to say, oh, you know, 3 feet is better, not better. 3 feet is equal to 6 feet, which we told you weeks ago. What's changed? Absolutely nothing. I mean, the numbers and all that stuff I talked about are going down, but scientifically, why is it more safe and okay to be 3 feet away when it used to be 6 feet away? Unless it was like, let's say, remember when in the very beginning they said this illness could be caught off of surfaces. So if somebody coughs on their computer and they're in their computer lab and they get up and they leave and somebody else comes back and starts touching the keys and then scratches their face, and then boom, they're on to COVID-19. They were hysteric about it. Remember, they were telling you if you get something in the mail from Amazon or whatever, because now you're not going to the store to buy stuff, people were literally having companies deliver their groceries and putting them on the porch. Of course, they're paying online. And then they go out and they're spraying all of their bottles of juice and packages of meat and cheese and cornflakes with, you know, some kind of disinfectant. You probably remember that. You probably remember if you were buying from Amazon, they would send you big signs about, well, when you open this, you should be gloved up and have your mask on and, you know, spray a little Clorox on all this stuff. I mean, I know they did it out of abundance of caution and they really didn't understand the disease, but we don't do that anymore. That makes sense. If you say, well, we thought it was a big issue, but now we know it's not a big issue. So whether you touch something that somebody touched in a while, it's not that big a deal. Doesn't mean that when you go to the restaurant, people are not going to pay particular attention to cleaning your seats as well as the table and all that stuff, because they are, because they're doing it out of abundance of caution. So that makes sense. That's scientifically based. They studied it. It's not happening. But why you can drop from 6 feet to 3 feet and be okay with it, nobody's given you an explanation as to why that's okay now. So my advice is be skeptical of what people are telling you. And it's just like this border crisis. Well, we can't call it a crisis. It's no longer a crisis. It never was a crisis. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge. And then the facts are slowly dribbling out that we have the biggest spike ever in the history of border crossings in the last 3 months. This month's not even over. That we had over 40,000 people cross in January, and the president wasn't even inaugurated till 16th. And in February, over 100,000 people have come over. In fact, the system is so overloaded that in the beginning, we were taking their names, doing their fingerprints, and telling them, okay, here's, you know, your date for when we're gonna let you go. Here's your date for when you need to come back and make your argument about asylum. Okay. Today, what are they doing? Adios. Adios. They're not testing them. We are letting people who are COVID positive into the United States. And since they're poor and they're seeking their relatives or whatever, they're riding buses because the buses are the cheapest thing to ride. And COVID positive people are riding Greyhound bus and Continental, whoever else is running around. COVID positive. Oh, well. So you can't trust the media. You can't trust a lot of things when it comes to when people put political motivations onto things. And if you think politics doesn't have something to do with COVID, you're asleep, because it's all a political game. I mean, the Trump had their political games, and now we got Biden and they're playing their political games. That's why you can't call it a crisis, because it was a crisis under one president, but with us, it's just a challenge. So, largest group of children detained ever in the history of the United States. So yeah, it's a crisis. And somebody, Henry Cuellar, who's a Democrat representative, U.S. representative, took some pictures while he was touring the facility and released those pictures. So if you want to look on the video or look on YouTube, or James O'Keefe has it on his Veritas website. What do you see? A bunch of people with a bunch of kids, adolescents, 7 to 17, who are laying on the floor, and they have those, they call moon blankets, those ones that look like pieces of aluminum foil, you know. They have that on accidents and seeing stuff because it keeps your body warmth with you. So it's kind of critical when you've been in an accident with shock and all that kind of stuff. So they have all these kids laying on the floor in these wrapped up in these aluminum looking blankets. And so what it looks like to me, being a half beaner, I guess, it looks like they're a bunch of burritos wrapped. I shouldn't be laughing, it's not funny, but they look like a bunch of burritos wrapped up, and they're all on the floor, and they got plexiglass dividers. So they're like, I don't know, 6 by 6 dividers on this floor. And then they have, I think, 8 human beings in there in their burrito blankets. It's not good, not good, not the way to do things, not something we should be proud of, regardless who the administration is. We ought to come up with something better than that. But so be critical when you hear things. Even when I say things, check it out. Just don't believe everything I say is true. Even though it is, feel free to check it out. All right. So, speaking of verifying, basically page 1 of this chapter needs to be clarified. It is true that Stanley Hall, who was a big writer in the early 1900s about adolescence and juvenile delinquency, any of you have taken a criminal justice course, you will have heard of Stanley Hall for sure. He was a big, big impact. Now, in psychology, we mention him because of his storm and stress theory of what happens in adolescence, because that's exactly what it is. It's a storm and it's very stressful. You who are, some of you might even be a teenager still, but you very recently went through adolescence, so you can remember the kind of stress it caused you, and with friends and your peer groups, and how you looked and how you thought, and whether you're competent, whether you view yourself as being competent. And many of you may have gotten your first job as an adolescent, and so you go through that whole competency stuff. Well, what you need to put in perspective, that in the 1800s, kids did not go to school, or if they did go to school, they only went to maybe 6th grade. I may have mentioned to you, my ex-wife, who was born in Mexico, has a 6th grade or 9th grade education, and then that was it. And that's not uncommon for people in Mexico to go no further than 9th grade, because that's sort of the division into high school. So a lot of kids today are still not going beyond middle school in countries like Mexico. And I compare that with the Philippines, and I have a few Philippine students here, so they are a good example of what the Philippines does. The Philippines is a very poor country, third world country, but they are rabid about education, just rabid about education. And when you travel through, especially where I go, which is a rural Philippines, You don't see buildings on the road going to where you're going, except schools. So you'll see jungle, 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 thatch houses, jungle, 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 boom, a building, and it's a school. So they really emphasize school. They really respect teachers. They hold them in very, very high esteem because of the value that the Philippines puts on education. That is different than Mexico, which has big cities with a lot of neat things, and then a lot of rural areas which doesn't have anything of much, except people, living off the land, which is the same as true in the Philippines. But Mexico doesn't have the insistence on people not only finishing high school, but going to college. The person that I'm dating graduated from college when she was 21. So, and virtually everybody she knows, everybody I know over there has a college education. They live in abject third world poverty, but they do have a college degree. It's kind of interesting. And how that plays into our conversation this morning is in the 1800s, the country was basically agrarian base, which means everybody was out on farms and ranches. Yes, we had cities, we had big cities, even big cities like San Francisco and Chicago, New York, LA. Those were big cities in the early 1900s, but not like they are today. And a whole bunch of people did not live in the city. So in the 1900s, we had a few major changes, tectonic, earth-shaking changes, because of mass production was developed. All our industrial base, like cotton gins and fabric and makers and shoemakers and the kinds of consumer goods that we use today, pots and pans and all that stuff, that was all being created on assembly lines, and people were coming by the millions from the hitherlands of raising corn and wheat and animals to going into the city and taking better paying jobs that weren't as hard as busting your hump 365 days out of the year working as a farmer or as a rancher. And so they flocked to the cities like moths to the light, and this caused some major problems because the young boys and girls, but mostly boys who were acting up, of course, when they were out in the fields, dad would make them do farming with them or herd cattle, whatever they're doing, and their nearest friend might be a mile away. Now they moved into the city. They're not tending animals or vegetable gardens or any of that stuff. So what are they doing? They're hanging around getting in trouble. That's what they're doing. And we had Stanley Hall was a good observer of that and talked about that. These guys were bored as hell, and they were living in these cramped quarters along with a whole bunch of other people and other people their age. And so they're hanging around, and says one guy sitting on a log going, man, I'm bored as hell. I don't have anything to do. Now you got 20 guys about the same age saying, what do we do? Well, some of them got into trouble, which is why we had this huge change in juvenile delinquency in the early 1900s. And school was not mandatory, at least high school was not mandatory. And so the laws changes. And in the year 1900, 1900, that year, 2/3 of the states in the United States had enacted laws to require mandatory attendance by adolescents into high school. And that changed the price of poker dramatically. First of all, the term adolescence didn't even exist until this revolutionary industrial revolution occurred and all these kids started being herded together in urban environments. That's when people acknowledge, hey, this is a developmental stage called adolescence, and it has its own needs and requirements and all that stuff. So the governments got really strict about making kids attend school all the way to high school because there was so much juvenile delinquency and problems. And even though it's early in the Industrial Revolution, people were seeing there's a need to have certain level of skills. If you're going to go to work in a factory as opposed to the farm, you might have to read a manual, or if you attend a class to get you up to speed as to how to work a machine or how to make connections or do whatever you're doing, you might need some education. As an educator, I will tell you, and you might be surprised, that if you want to go into a technical school, it's too late for you. You're already in college, good for you. But if you wanted to go into a technical school while you were in high school, the requirement is you have to have at least an 8th grade reading level. And I taught special education in a special school, an alternative high school, which was basically filled of a couple groups of people: juvenile delinquents, girls who had gotten pregnant or were pregnant or had gotten pregnant and now they have a kid, guys coming back from prison. Yes, guys coming back from prison. And as a condition, they had to attend high school up to the age of 21. And of course, behavioral disordered students, people that couldn't control themselves, always in fights. And then another one was homosexuals, because they get so much grief in normal high school that they a large group of them decided, I'll go to the alternative school. I'm tired of people making fun of me. And I don't know that happens so much now. It's more probably a transgender issue as opposed to gay or lesbian. So that's the kind of kids I taught. And the fact is they were required to go to school. And like I said, if they've been in trouble with the law, a lot of them were ordered to go to school even if they were over 18. I mean, I had a guy who was involved in a murder case. It was convicted as some accomplice to a murder case. He was a gangbanger, and he was like 20. He was 20. So he was a good student. He was actually a nice guy, which is another issue that is brought out in this chapter, that there are people who can go down the wrong road and then sort of have an epiphany and change. And one of the reasons child psychologists are not allowed to call children or adolescents psychopaths was because there is hope, legitimate hope, with troubled adolescents that they grow out of it. And if you take the number of kids that are involved in the juvenile justice system and then look at them 2 years later after they're out, they're over 18 and they're out, the statistics are dramatic. It's like night and day. You've been fighting the man, rage against the machine, you know, since you've been 12 years old. And all of a sudden you get to be 20, you get a job, maybe you got a girlfriend, maybe you got a kid. Your whole body says, hey, let's go tag some cars. Let's go tag some walls in Segundo Barrio. Kids just say, no, I'm not going to do that crap anymore. I'm not into it. Just not into it. It's amazing. So that's one of the reasons that we, by law in the United States, we seal juvenile court records. So because we don't want it known to people who used to be in the juvenile justice system and now they're out of it, all the sort of sordid things that they did when they were a juvenile delinquent. Now, of course, if there's a need to get in, if there's a law enforcement need to get into those records, they'll get into it. But they're not transferred to college and all that kind of stuff. And the statistics show that people just might have been raging against the man and raging against the system, raging against their parents, authority, and they just age out of it. Now, some don't. Those go on to commit more crimes as an adult and get punished as an adult and get labeled a psychopath if they are. The most we can call a kid, someone under 18, is a conduct disorder, which means they're equivalent to antisocial personality disorder, except they're under 18. If they're over 18, then they get that moniker, antisocial personality disorder. People that, doesn't matter what age, they're still doing stupid things like unlawful issues like, you know, not like robbing banks. Well, it could be robbing banks, but it doesn't have to be that serious. Just, you know, these porch pirates that go around and steal your Amazon products off your porch as adults. That's an example of antisocial behavior. Somebody who's told that there's a 10 o'clock curfew because of XYZ, and they say, forget it, I'll do what I want to do. So Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, when he was in office, which was after the stock market fall, he put a lot of pressure on all the states and to make them enforce attendance in high school. So by the time 1930 rolled around, which was just after the stock market crash, 100% of the states had mandatory attendance in high school. And that's a tremendous difference from just 10 years earlier. Well, not in 1930, but let's say 2/3 of them had it in 1900, the actual year, 1901, 1900. You know, 10 years before that, not nobody, but rarely were people, adolescents in high school. Number one, they had to be out helping their family with the crop or the animals or both. And they couldn't be spared to go get an education, which is a lot of the reasons. That's why my ex-wife didn't finish anything more than 9th grade, because in her case, her mother died, and then she, being the oldest, she had to take care of the rest of the kids because dad was working. And it's interesting because I had the experience of spending time in Mexico, inner Mexico, Chihuahua, Delicias, Mioque. Not really, just drive through Mioque, but I always love that town. Mioque. ¿Dónde soy? Mioque. Love it. Anyway, compare that with my experience being in the Philippines, which is a poor country too. And people go to school right now. I have a future sister-in-law who is a senior in high school. She is pulling her hair out because all they're doing, they don't have Zoom and all that stuff. So all they're doing is delivering these. I don't even know. I didn't ask her how but they're getting all these modules, and that's what they're getting, and they're getting it through their phones for the most part, because a lot of them don't have computers and they don't have internet anyway. It's killing her because she's a high functioning, high academically driven student. And now all she does is sit and on her phone doing these stupid modules all day, and it's killing her. It's killing all of you. You who are older have some skills and abilities and competencies that younger people don't have. So it's really wiping out the four-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, that group, the early elementary schools. It's really wiping them out. Even sitting and doing what we're doing right now, it's not working for them, because there's something about human connection. And this, in my opinion, is a hell of a lot better what I'm doing with you. Even if you're not watching it live, at least you get some interaction with your instructor and get some feeling for my emotions and whatever motivates you to study and for exams and all that stuff. But when somebody just tells you mods, or as I understand it, most people at EPCC who are teaching online are not doing face-to-face online communication. They're just putting it on Blackboard, saying, there's what you read, this is what you need. Test is on Friday. I don't agree with that, which is why I'm here. And I'm doing it all for Victoria and whoever else is listening as a way of attending this class. All right, so I cleared that up. Alarmed by this situation, the Roosevelt administration proposed laws to lure, look on the way they say that, to lure young people to school. This is in the 30s. So what is he talking about? Or what is the author's talking about? Truant officers. They punished kids who didn't come to school. Before, they said it was mandatory. Whatever. What does that mean? Mandatory. That means you have to do it. What happens if I don't? Nothing. But you probably can't get a job if you don't have a high school education. Well, in the 30s, nobody could get a job because of the depression from the stock market crash. So that's no big deal. That's no big incentive. But later on, when we started picking ourselves up, really, the sad part, the stock market crashed in 1927. When were the economic doldrums and jobs, when did that change? Answer, World War II. Then guys were being called up by the hundreds of thousands in ways that we can't even comprehend. If you want to have an idea of what was going on in that world, go watch Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan. That is a graphically shocking movie. But guess what? It's an accurate representation. Millions of people died. 58,000 people died in the Vietnam War, which is horrible. 58,000. But that more than that was killed in one day in World War II. So all those adult males who were capable of carrying a weapon and fighting. They got sucked up into World War II. So what did that mean? Women who never worked before, they have to go in at work. And although child labor laws existed then, the point is we got women working and we got young men that hadn't been old enough to be sent over to the war around. And it became, and of course, we're becoming more and more industrialized. And so it became pretty obvious that you're not going to get a job in the economy unless you have a high school education. And now today, one of the reasons you're here today in this class is because you figured out, yeah, I can get a job, but I'm going to be flipping burgers or doing retail for the rest of my life. And there's nothing wrong with those two jobs. My first job I got when I was 17 in high school, and I worked at a restaurant as a dishwasher and a busser, you know, and I was happy as hell to have the job, delighted. And when you get those big paychecks, $92 and get one that's woo, 3 figures, over $100 for 2 weeks of work, you know, woo, wild times, you know. It was, you know, it's obvious. I'm speaking to the choir here because you guys already know that. Many of you are working now. That's why you're not here watching this video. It's because you're working. And it's tough. I always ask the question of you when I'm in a face-to-face classroom. Those of you who are working, would you be doing that job today if one of two things? Either they didn't pay you or you were independently wealthy, your parents were independently wealthy, and you didn't need to work. Would you still work? And people, for the most part, say, hell no. If I didn't have to work, I'm not going to work. Or, hell no, I'm not going to be doing janitorial work or flipping burgers or selling dresses at the mall because I'm happy to have a job and a paycheck, but I'm not willing to devote my life to this. But there are some who say, yeah, I would do it. I would continue to work if I didn't get paid. Because people work generally because they need money to live on. And what kind of people are these and what kind of jobs they're doing? Well, generally, they're doing jobs in human services, like they're working in a daycare center or maybe a nursing home or something. They're dealing with people, human relations, and they really like what they're doing. So yes, they're getting paid, but if they got a cut in pay or their pay was wiped out, some of them would still continue. Teaching, I'm a music teacher and I'm teaching kids how to pick up instruments and read music and all that. And if I wasn't getting paid to do it, I would still do it if I could live. You know, if I didn't need the money, I would still do it. So it depends on what motivates you. And hopefully all of you will find a job in your future that you really like doing. Because that old saying about if you do what you like to do as a job, then it'll never be a job to you. It's just the way you are, just doing it. My friends tell me, hey, old man, you need to retire. And it's like, no, what they really tell me is you'll never quit until you, not COVID, but something else takes me out. You'll continue teaching because it's so rewarding for me. I like doing it. And the answer to that is yes. If I can teach, especially online, I'll continue to do it because I like it. And I feel it makes me feel valuable being able to do it. So, okay, in chapter 9, you have table 9.1, which is stereotypes about adolescence, true or false. So we will go through these little 10 questions, and we'll see how smart you are, because you can listen and vote in your mind, because I'm not going to see you. The first question: adolescents think about life in a deeper, more thoughtful way than children do. True or false? Ding, ding. Yes, that is true. Why? We talked about it. Concrete operations. You're getting older. Your little part of your brain up here, your executive function, is getting sharper and sharper. Question 2. Adolescence is when we develop our personal moral code for living. Correct. Correct. We learn our value system. I teach ethics a lot in college courses, and you develop your morality, your ethics are two different things, but for our argument's sake, your executive function of your brain, your frontal cortex, is under heavy construction, and you're weighing things out in the world. You know, do I want to, smoke dope and kick back at the house, or do I want to get myself involved in some education or do something, all these things. Do I want to start having sexual relations? Am I homosexual? Am I transgender? All these big life questions are all worked on and figured out before adolescence is over. Virtually 100% of the people who reach 18 years old, for instance, I teach this in human sexuality, they know what sexual preference they have. And some of them tell you they learned it when they were 4 or 5 years old, which I didn't put much credence to until I talked to more people who felt the same way. So I will give people credit. There are people who are at that age of growth and development that say, I knew I was gay. I didn't know what the word was, but I knew I was different. And I didn't like gender stereotypical activities, boys going out playing football and going fishing together, or baseball, or whatever. I don't know what adolescent boys do nowadays, but or even not even adolescent, just younger 6, 7, 8-year-olds. The gay people that I've talked to said they knew then that they just weren't into it. And now they're adults, and now they can choose which lifestyle they want to live. So our personal moral ethical code is developed, and also our sexual orientation, which is not part of the question, but it's part of my answer. Question 3, adolescents are highly sensitive to what other people think. You think? Yeah, I told you, once you start getting concrete operations, then you can realistically assess yourself and realistically assess other people. And once you do that, you're into the comparison game, and you are super sensitive. Plus, your focus of influence moves from your family, your parents, your religion, grandparents. It moves from that into early adolescence, where the biggest thing that's important to you are your peer group and their assessment of you. Friends are more important. Well, maybe not more important, but they're on a battle with the influence of your parents, depending how close you were. Does the term secure attachment mean anything to you? Yes, we are now revisiting secure and insecure attachment in adolescence. Yes, we are. Because we're also talking about our sexuality. So whether we're attracted to people of the same sex or opposite sex, or we're not yet, figured it out, these are all monumental things. And this adds to that factor of that Stanley Hall called a storm and stress. So, all right, next question. So the answer is yes, of course, it is true. We are highly sensitive. Next question is 4. Adolescents are unusually susceptible to peer influence. I already said that. You already know that. Wasn't that long ago? You know, here's a good example. When was it popular? What age were you when it was popular and allowed for people to color their hair green and blue and hot pink? Because before that time, people didn't do it. Then all sorts of people are doing it. Today, a limited group of people do it. So why did that get hot and heavy in the in-between time? Because it was peer accepted and it was a cool thing to do. So if you couldn't dye your hair blue or pink or rainbow or something, you didn't feel right. And for those people who lived through those years and didn't do their hair that way, those are people who either, number one, had a really strong self-identity and they didn't feel like they needed to do that, or they had parents that was going to hit them over the head with a frying pan if they did it. Couple things possibilities going on there, but nothing more important when you're 12, 13, 14, and 15 to have the hairstyle, to have the right clothes, jewelry, phones. If you don't have the right phone, then you aren't nada. So, all right. 5, adolescents are highly emotional compared to other age groups. Correct. You have all this crazy stuff going on. Of course, you're going to be emotional. 6, adolescents are prone to taking risk. You think when people get on top of a car and do windsurfing, when somebody's driving the car and they're on the top, woo! Yeah, we do crazy things. Those of us who did crazy things in adolescence are surprised we're alive today to talk about it, because we did some really stupid things, especially if it involved drugs and alcohol and sex as an adolescent. Wow, that's big risk taking. Okay. So yes, we're prone to taking risk. Our frontal cortex, that executive function of our brain, it's not quite developed yet. It's not going to be developed until you're 28 or 29, but you're much better at 23 than you are at 17. Number 7, adolescents are emotionally disturbed. All adolescents are emotionally disturbed. No, not true. Troubled, storm and stress, yes. Emotionally disturbed, no. 8, rates of suicide are at their peak during adolescence. No, they're not. A lot of self-harm, cutting, burning, bulimia, anorexia, all these things, which are not good, they make a big splash in adolescence. And did you know, you remember this from Introduction to Psychology, that there are nations, countries that don't have problems with bulimia and anorexia nervosa. They just don't have it. It's more a phenomena in the Western culture. Like the Philippines. Do you think you have anorexia or bulimia in the Philippines? No. Probably have less of it in Mexico than you do in the US. And as far as suicidal attempts, like superficial cutting on your wrist or something, that goes up, especially among females. They're much higher at doing stuff. Boys, of course, do other kinds of things, usually aggressive things. You're going to find out in the news today, they're talking about these attacks on Asians. And there has been an uptick in attacks on Asians. And guess who's doing it? Adolescents. Number 8, suicide is not increased, but suicidal actions, precursors to death, do seem to play in, like self-harm, cutting, burning yourself. That has all to do with self-concept and acceptance and all that other stuff we just talked about. Number 9, adolescents feel more stressed out with their parents than with their peers. Well, yeah, because they're separating from the super influence of their parents and putting it into their peer group. So their parents stress them out, or their peer group embrace them and make them feel better. Number 10, getting in with a bad crowd makes it more likely for teenagers to go down the wrong path. Duh. If you're looking for acceptance among your peers and all your peers are out tagging, or in the old days, before you were born, people were doing things like stealing hubcaps. Why? Just to irritate people. So they drive around with 3 hubcaps instead of 4. Bumming cigarettes or stealing cigarettes or shoplifting in general, booze, doing beer runs, and those kinds of stupid things that some of us did when we were adolescents. And of course, those are the kind of things that stop for the most part, You don't see people generally over 25 doing beer runs, going to a 7-Eleven or Quick Pick or, those kinds of establishments that have beer and wine, and then picking up a 6-pack and running out the door without, paying for it. That doesn't happen that much among older people, but it happens in that window of 17 to 22 or 23 or something, and then it goes away. So, 3 classic theories of teenage thinking. Okay, we're 11:30. I want to end by showing you this video. Now, this video is on Blackboard, but I want you to pay particular attention to this video, because I think when I teach ethics at the college level and graduate level, how we got our morality, where we got it. The book contains this thing about the stages of development that Kohlberg came up with. And this is another piece of information. Kohlberg was writing, I don't know whether it was his master's thesis or his dissertation, but he got into this whole thing about how people make decisions, how to morally and ethically make these decisions. He did that in his, I think it was his dissertation. And because of that, he is like the world's expert now. He's probably dead, but he started it, and it was all because he needed something to do his dissertation on. And this is what he did. When I was practicing law in Albuquerque, there was a guy who did employment law, and he'd only been out of law school maybe 3 years, and he was doing employment law. And he was the only guy in town, and Albuquerque is a big city. It's as big as you know, Chuco down here. And I asked a guy who went to the University of New Mexico, well, what's up with this dude? And they said, well, he took some class in last year, third year of law school, where it was like a seminar class or something, and he had to write a huge paper or something. Anyway, he got into this employment law stuff because of a class that he signed up for. And when he got out of law school, which is, you know, months after he had done this project, he started talking to people, and people started sending him employment law cases because they didn't know anything about it, and they didn't really want to, wasn't their purview, you know, they're within their purview to do that. So they picked this guy, and they're 3 years out of law school, and he was one of these guys that, you know, graduated from high school, boom, 4 years of college, boom, 3 years of law school. So he would have been like 25, and then, you know, 3 years of experience. It's only 28. He's getting all the employment law cases, and he was charging people $500 up front just to talk to him. What? I got to pay to talk to you? You know, I don't know if I have a case or not. It's going to say, well, it doesn't matter. You ain't talking to me unless you give me $500, and then I'll talk to you. And those of us who are practicing a different kind of law would never do that, because people would say, you know, forget it. And so it's never ceased to amaze me that people who are in school like you guys, and you have an assignment, it can lead to, whoever knows, to big, big, big things. Like, and Kohlberg's a good example of it. Another one is the intelligences of Gardner. Gardner's 9 intelligences. That was something he worked on as a PhD dissertation student. And lo and behold, here we are talking about him way after his death. And he made a lot of money. He made a career out of doing what he was doing. So don't think that some of your efforts that you put into the class, maybe not so much freshman, sophomore year, which you guys are doing, but even junior, senior year, certainly graduate school, if you have a particular interest and you pursue it, you write a paper, you do a presentation or something, bam, that could lead you to a great career, especially if you like it. Kohlberg actually liked working with ethics and morality, okay? So that's why he became really good at it. That's all he did, and I shouldn't minimize, but I mean, that's what he did his entire psychological time, was working on that. And you can imagine people like Piaget, who was a biologist, working with children and stages of development. It has a profound impact. It can have a profound impact. So let's see how lucky or unlucky I am as to whether I can pick up one of these videos. The answer is yes, I can, because I can see them. So let me start this one, he says, optimistically. Let's go. Let's open up and let's play it. This is, stop this so I can talk. Victoria, can you see that?
Yes.
Great, perfect. This guy, believe it or not, does not teach in psychology. He is a business professor at Harvard. Look at that. Look at that auditorium in Harvard. And you'll be able to see the audience. This is one class that he teaches. He is so good at what he does that these students who are Harvard students take this class in the hundreds, as you will see in a minute, because he is really, really interesting. I love this guy. I wish I was a good or as good orator as he is. So this video is 54 minutes long. Obviously, I'm not going to play 54 minutes. I just want to play this very beginning and look at the title, The Moral Side of Murder. What? Moral side of murder? What are you talking about? Well, I'll play it. Victoria, thank you for sticking with me and helping me out with these technical problems this morning. And I'm going to play this, and then I'm going to cut it off because I don't want it on the whole recorded thing, because then people will definitely fall asleep. But at least you can get a taste of what this guy's doing. And if you want to watch the entire video, that'll be up to you because it's already posted. One last comment. I noticed a lot of you did makeup test over this holiday. Some people are still missing tests, so I don't know what you're going to do, folks. You know who you are. You need to contact me and work out something. Otherwise, this class is not going to do well on your grade point average, and it's something that could be corrected if you and I can work it out. So shoot me an email and we'll work it out. All right, watch this.
This is a course about justice, and we begin with a story.
And the
Suppose you're
volume
driver of a trolley car, and your trolley car
is not
hurtling down
good.
the track
Victoria, can you hear that okay?
an hour. And at the end of the track, you notice 5 workers working
Yeah,
the track.
It's
I
not,
think so.
it's
Try
not
to
really
stop,
low.
But you can't. Your
A little
brakes
bit.
won't work.
Let's see.
You
Well,
feel
let's just see
desperate
what I can
because you
do.
know that if you crash into these 5 workers, they will all die. Let's assume you know that for sure.
Well, it's got the caption, so I guess that's the best I'm going to get. Because if I get out of here, it's liable to kick it out. But since we're recording, I don't want to do that.
Track. And at the end of that track, there's one worker working at the track. Your steering wheel works, so you can turn the trolley car, if you want to, onto the side track, killing the one, but sparing the 5. Here's our first question. What's the right thing to do? What would you do? Let's take a poll. How many would turn the trolley car onto the side track? Raise your hands. How many wouldn't? How many would go straight ahead? Keep your hands up, those of you who would go straight ahead. A handful of people would. The vast majority would turn. Let's hear first. Now we need to begin to investigate the reasons why you think it's the right thing to do. Let's begin with those in the majority who would turn to go onto the side track. Why would you do it? What would be your reason? Who's willing to volunteer a reason? Go ahead, stand up.
Because it can't be right to kill 5 people when you can only kill 1 person instead.
It wouldn't be right to kill 5 if you could kill 1 person instead. That's a good reason. That's a good reason. Who else? Does everybody agree with that reason? Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking it's the same reason on 9/11 with regard to people who flew the plane into the Pennsylvania field as heroes because they chose to kill the people in the plane and not kill more people in big buildings.
So the principle there was the same on 9/11. It's a tragic circumstance, but better to kill 1 and so that 5 can live. Is that the reason most of you had, those of you who would turn? Yes? Let's hear now from those in the minority, those who wouldn't turn. Yes?
Well, I think that's the same type of mentality that justifies genocide and totalitarianism. In order to save one type of race, you wipe out the other.
So what would you do in this case? You would, to avoid the horrors of genocide, you would crash into the five and kill them?
Presumably, yes.
You,
Yeah.
okay, who else? That's a brave answer. Thank you. Let's consider another trolley car case and see whether those of you in the majority want to adhere to the principle better that one should die so that five should live. This time you're not the driver of the trolley car, you're an onlooker. You're standing on a bridge overlooking a trolley car track. And down the track comes a trolley car. At the end of the track are five workers. The brakes don't work. The trolley car is about to careen into the five and kill them. And now, you're not the driver. You really feel helpless until you notice, standing next to you, leaning over the bridge, is a very fat man. And you could give him a shove. He would fall over the bridge, onto the track, right in the way of the trolley car. He would die, but he would spare the five. Now, how many would push the fat man over the bridge? Raise your hand. How many wouldn't? Most people wouldn't. Here's the obvious question. What became of the principle? Better to save five lives even if it means sacrificing one. What became of the principle that almost everyone endorsed in the first case? I need to hear from someone who is in the majority in both cases. How do you explain the difference between the two? Yes.
The second one, I guess, involves an active choice of pushing the person down, which I guess that person himself would otherwise not have been involved in the situation at all. And so to choose on his behalf, I guess, to involve him in something that he otherwise would have escaped is, I guess, more than what you have in the first case, where the three parties, the driver and the two sets of workers are already, I guess, in the situation.
But the guy working, the one on the track off to the side, he didn't choose to sacrifice his life any more than the fat man did he?
That's true, but he was on the tracks. And
this guy was on the bridge. Go ahead, you can come back if you want. All right, it's a hard question. You did well. You did very well. It's a hard question. Who else can find a way of reconciling the reaction of the majority in these two cases? Yes.
Well, I guess in the first case where you have the one worker and the five, it's a choice between those two. You have to make a certain choice, and people are going to die because of the trolley car, not necessarily because of your direct actions. The trolley car is a runaway thing, and you're making a split-second choice. Whereas pushing the fat man over is an actual act of murder on your part. You have control over that, whereas you may not have control over the trolley car. So I think it's a slightly different situation.
All right, who has a reply? No, that's good. Who has a way? Who wants to reply? Is that a way out of this?
I don't think that's a very good reason because you choose to. It's either way you have to choose who dies because you either choose to turn and kill the person, which is an active conscious thought to turn, or you choose to push that man over, which is also an active conscious action. So either way you're making a choice.
Do you want to reply?
Well, I'm not really sure if that's the case. It just still seems kind of different, the act of actually pushing someone over onto the tracks and killing him. you are actually killing him yourself.
You're pushing him with your own hands.
You're pushing him. And that's different than steering something that is going to cause death into another. You know, it doesn't really sound right saying it now.
No, it's good.
But I'm up here.
It's good. What's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew. Let me ask you this question, Andrew.
Yes.
Suppose standing on the bridge next to the fat man, I didn't have to push him. Suppose he were standing over a trap door that I could open by turning a steering wheel like that. Would you turn?
For some reason, that still just seems more wrong.
Right?
I mean, maybe if you accidentally like leaned into the steering wheel or something like that. But or say that the car is hurtling towards
Hi,
the switch
Phoebe.
that will drop the trap. Then I could agree with that.
Fair enough. It still seems wrong in a way that it doesn't seem wrong in the first case to turn, you say.
And in another way, I mean, in the first situation, you're involved directly with the situation. The second one, you're an onlooker as well.
All right.
So you have the choice of becoming involved or not by pushing the fat man.
Let's forget for the moment about this case. That's good. Let's imagine a different case. This time you're a doctor in an emergency room, and 6 patients come to you. They've been in a terrible trolley car wreck. 5 of them sustained moderate injuries. 1 is severely injured. You could spend all day caring for the 1 severely injured victim. But in that time, the 5 would die. Or you could look after the 5, restore them to health, but during that time, the 1 severely injured person would die. How many would save the 5? Now is the doctor. How many would save the 1? Very few people. Just a handful of people. Same reason, I assume. 1 life versus 5? Now consider another doctor case. This time you're a transplant surgeon, and you have 5 patients, each in desperate need of an organ transplant in order to survive. 1 needs a heart, 1 a lung, 1 a kidney, 1 a liver, and the 5th, a pancreas. And you have no organ donors. You are about to see them die. And then it occurs to you that in the next room, there's a healthy guy who came in for a checkup. And he's, you like that? And he's taking a nap. You could go in very quietly, yank out the 5 organs, that person would die. But you could save the 5. How many would do it? Anyone? How many? Put your hands up if you would do it. Anyone in the balcony? You would? Be careful, don't lean over too much. What? How many wouldn't? All right, what do you say? Speak up in the balcony, you who would yank out the organs. Why?
I'd actually like to explore a slightly alternate possibility of just taking the 1 of the 5 who needs an organ, who dies first, and using their 4 healthy organs to save the other 4.
That's a pretty good idea. That's a great idea. Except for the fact that you just wrecked the philosophical point. So let's step back from these stories and these arguments to notice a couple of things about the way the arguments have begun to unfold. Certain moral principles have already begun to emerge from the discussions we've had.
Okay,
Let's consider
I'm gonna stop here. This guy goes on. You can tell this is just a great
the discussion.
discussion, morals and ethics, and this guy is really smart.
Morals and
And of course, we got really smart students there. So they're asking good questions and responding in a really excellent way. So I encourage you to watch the rest of the video. It is on Blackboard. And also watch Heinz Dilemma, which involves the 3 stages of moral development that Kohlberg talks about. It's a little cartoon thing. It's very short, but it does help you understand what the issue is. So, all right, welcome back. Thank you, Victoria. She's speaking for and representing all the rest of you, so she is in quite a great position. Thank you again, and I'll see you all on Thursday. Again, if you're somehow missing a test, get to me so that you can pass this course, because if you don't, it's very likely you're not going to pass. So I don't want to see that happen. Thank you, Victoria. Un otro de todos. Adios. Hasta la.
People were reluctant.
Jueves, eh?
People thought it was just wrong